Hello, I'm Pastor Catherine Bowers from Evansburg United Methodist Church in the beautiful and historic village of Evansburg. That's part of Lower Providence Township in Pennsylvania. I was thinking about this congregation. It's been here since 1833 and how they must have lived through the former pandemic, the worst epidemic that the world had seen over 100 years ago, and what that must have been like for them, and how they must have prayed their way through it. And one day they finally saw the end of it. And that's what we're going to do too. We're going to pray our way through this. None of us were there, so we don't remember it. But historians are telling us about it, about mistakes that were made and the right things that were done. And I hope we can learn from the mistakes. A lot of the mistakes had to do with people not taking the threat seriously enough, not acting soon enough. So I hope we don't repeat those mistakes. I was remembering my visit to the doctor a couple months ago, and it was just a regular checkup, and the nurse said to me at one point, "Are you getting the flu shot?" And I used to turn those down because I don't like shots, but I'm getting older. I know I should do it. But I said to her, "It's after January. Isn't it really too late?" And she said, "Oh, no, it's not too late." I said, "Okay, I guess I'll do it." Next thing I knew, she had a needle. It was coming from my arm, and I quickly looked away because I don't want to see it. It wasn't too bad. But I was feeling thankful for the people in the healthcare professions who work so hard to keep us well, all the thought and care that goes into what they do. All the thought and care and planning that goes into making a flu shot every year, where they try to predict what will be risky, and who knows how many lives they've saved or what epidemics they have already prevented. So I'm feeling really thankful for them today. Thank you. If you're a healthcare worker, and we're going to keep praying for you. Today I want to talk to you about the story in the Gospel of John of the raising of Lazarus. That's in chapter 11. It's a long story. There's so much there. But for today, I'd like to just focus on the first part of the story, the conversations that Jesus has with Martha and her sister Mary. Now, we know they were good friends of Jesus, that they showed him and his disciples hospitality. They lived in Bethany, a small town, not too far from Jerusalem. And Jesus knew that he could always go to their house and find a warm welcome and a good meal and a place to sleep. And these two sisters seem to have this ministry of hospitality. Interesting about the sisters is there is no mention of any husbands or fathers in the household. They do not seem to be married, and that would have been the norm for those days. A young girl would have to get married as a teenager. There wasn't really any choice about it. So people have wondered about these two women, why they don't seem to have husbands. It would have been normal in those days to refer to them as Mary, wife of so-and-so, or Martha, wife of so-and-so. And that's just not there. Some people have speculated perhaps they were widows, but then again, it would have been normal to refer to them as widows. So we have these two unmarried women with some means. I find that interesting. And Jesus spends time with them, and that's interesting. Jesus often chooses to spend time with people who are kind of coloring outside the lines. I find that very interesting. And so they were his friends. Also, their brother Lazarus was his friend. And so while Jesus is with his disciples somewhere near the Jordan, a message comes to him from Mary and Martha. Your good friend Lazarus is ill, the one you love. It says the one you love is ill. And you would think, Jesus is a healer, you would think he would get up right away and go to the bedside of his good friend. But that's not what he does. He stays where he is for a couple more days. What's he doing? We don't know. Is he ministering to other people? Is he taking a break? It doesn't tell us. But finally, he says to his disciples, let's go to Judea. That's where Bethany is, in Judea. And the disciples are a bit alarmed and hesitant. Are we going there again, they say? You know, there are people there who want to do harm to you, want to kill you. It's not a safe thing to go there. However, Jesus has decided. So Thomas says, oh, we'll go with him and we'll die with him. Thomas, he's always the pessimist. But he's committed. I like that about him. You know, okay, we'll probably die, but I'm going because I'm sticking with Jesus. So they go. And by the time Jesus gets near the village of Bethany, Lazarus has already been dead for several days. Martha gets word that Jesus is on his way. So she runs out to meet him on the road. Now that's interesting, because if you remember the story of Mary and Martha from another gospel, in the Gospel of Luke, Martha is the one who was worried about the kitchen and taking care of the guests, and as she was annoyed with Mary for not helping her. And now it's a funeral time, and there must be many guests, and yet Martha rushes out of the house. She's not fussing about the kitchen. Let someone else worry about that. I need to go see Jesus. And she runs out, and she finds him on the road. And she says to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. What a sad thing to say. Well, you can hear the sorrow in it. You can hear the confusion. Where were you? Why didn't you come sooner? The questions. And a little bit of an accusation, maybe. Jesus, you're too late. You didn't get here in time. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Lazarus is a young man. It's not time for him to go. It's a tragedy that this has happened. Jesus asks her, do you believe in the resurrection? And she says yes. She's a student of his. She knows very well that he teaches resurrection. She says, yes, I believe there will be a resurrection at the last day. And she goes back to the house. She doesn't know what Jesus is planning. She goes back to the house, tells her sister Mary, the teacher is calling for you. Mary rushes out, finds Jesus on the road. Some others who are at the house follow her. And when Mary finds Jesus, she says, oh Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same exact words that Martha said. And we can imagine how Martha and Mary had prayed and had hoped as Lazarus got sicker and sicker that Jesus would get there in time. But now it's too late. Lazarus is gone, and he's even buried. He's already been in the grave for several days. It's too late. Jesus goes to the tomb, and he asks them to unroll the stone. And people are hesitant. They say, it's been several days. There will be a spell. What could he be thinking? What could Jesus be thinking? But they do unroll the stone. And Jesus calls Lazarus, come out. And he does. Lazarus is alive. And he is restored. Have you ever been praying for something and you pray and pray and you're not getting an answer right away? Has that ever happened to you? That's happened to me. And it seems to be taking God a long time. And you're praying heartfelt prayers. And you begin to wonder if God is going to do anything, if God hears you or cares about you. That happens to us. And God seems to be moving very slowly or not at all. My seminary had a professor named Kosuke Koyama. He was a Japanese Christian theologian. And he wrote a book called 3 Mile an Hour God, in which he said that God moves at a different pace than we do. We live in a very fast-moving world, and God is on a different timeline. And he wrote this in 1979. It's so much more true today that we live in a fast-paced world. We live in a world where you can get just about anything you want with a click. And we don't understand when things take time and when God seems to be taking time. Koyama suggested that God's time is a different time. Sometimes the Bible says that things happen in the fullness of time, when it's time, when it's ready. That's when God acts. That's when we see that God is at work. Really, God is at work all the time. But we don't always see that. I heard a story one time from a woman about waiting on God. It was her testimony. She said she had been praying for her husband. Her husband became a drug addict. And she was praying for him every day. She was praying that he would turn away from that something would change, but he just got worse. And she kept praying for him. She prayed for him when he was out, and she didn't know if he was coming back. She prayed for him when he came home and passed out on the couch. She said she would kneel down in front of the couch, put her hands on him, and pray for him while he was passed out. And she kept praying for him and kept praying for him. And people were telling her, you should just kick him out, give up on him. But she felt that she should keep praying. And then finally, after a few years, one day, he said, I need to get sober. And she got him some help. And he was restored. And their marriage was restored. That was a long time to wait. I don't know why we have to wait so long sometimes, but I do know that we do. We wait on God. God is never too late because God is on God's time. Whatever you're praying for, I encourage you to keep praying. We must learn how to wait. It's a spiritual challenge that we all have to face at some time or another. These days we are praying for an end to COVID-19, and that may take a while. And we may have to wait longer than we even think we can. It will test us. We need God's help and strength to endure and to do the right things. And I believe this crisis will cast a bright light on our strengths and our weaknesses. We are going to see the best of what our nation can do. And we're going to see some mistakes and failures as well. However long it takes, keep praying. May God's grace be with us through this. Jesus is never too late. This is the good news from the Gospel of John for today.